Twilight's New Moon by Zoe Horse. Chapter 2. Her muzzle inches away. Time until the spell wears off. 4 hours and 57 minutes. You can't keep your eyes shut this whole time, you know. Yes, I can. I'm going to sleep for the next 5 hours. And then when the spell wears off, I'm going to turn you into a grape and stamp on you, Twilight replied, keeping her eyes shut tight. She had managed to keep her composure as best she could, but not enough to make her cheeks cool down, and had simply shut her eyes and pretended she wasn't there. The replay of the end of her dream kept on rippling in and out of sight in the black void of her mind's eye, causing her to have to forcefully regulate her breathing so as not to get overwhelmed. Not like she could really do anything about it, anyway. She was stuck here. Oh, a grape. How did you know that that is one of Trixie's favorite foods? Shut up. I'm not paying attention to you. Well, if you won't pay attention to me, who will? Twilight didn't respond. Don't give me the silent treatment. It's your fault that we're stuck in this mess. My fault! Twilight's eyes snapped open, the rage inside of her lashing out. You were the one in my basement. What were you even doing down here in the first place? Trixie's smile faded. She looked slightly taken back by Twilight's outburst, before grinning. Told you couldn't keep your eyes shut, she said, sticking her tongue out at her, their closeness meaning her tongue was now hovering centimeters away from her nose. Twilight's anger turned back into gay panic as she glanced down at it. If she also stuck her tongue out, they would be touching. She quickly forced herself to look back up into her eyes. Trixie seemed too proud of herself for winning that she didn't seem to notice. Twilight's panic turned to anger again, but not towards Trixie, instead towards herself for thinking like that. She should not be thinking like that. She let out a long sigh. Shut up, she growled and shut her eyes again. Trixie left her alone for the time being. Time until the spell wears off. 4 hours and 35 minutes. That must have been about 3 hours, right? Said Trixie, who had been distracting herself by looking all around her field of vision to try and entertain herself, practicing rolling of her R's for her catchphrase, and making weird popping noises with her mouth. Twilight was painfully aware of how long they had been laying there. It's only been about 20 minutes, she said slowly. What? But this has been an eternity! Again, not my fault. Oh, but it is. Trixie, you are not the victim here. Twilight opened her eyes again. She'd gotten used to her presence, and was beginning to be able to control herself a little better. This is a whole lot worse for me than it is for you. She felt a sudden pang of realization shoot through her veins. Oh, really? And why is that? How is you facing me worse than me facing you? Asked Trixie, sounding genuinely curious. Just what exactly were you doing in my basement? Twilight replied quickly as she changed the subject, her heart pounding. The very last thing she wanted was for her to accidentally admit to her feelings. She could feel herself starting to sweat a little. Yes, you see, Twilight, the great and powerful Trixie felt simply awful about what I did to this town. She started with a melodramatic flair to her speech. Twilight rolled her eyes. Here we go. And well, I thought to myself, how should I grace Twilight with my presence and surprise her? Well, what would be better than a home-cooked meal? For Trixie knows how much Twilight loves oats, and she mused that she must keep her oats in the cellar. I thought I had found your oat storage room down here, but it was just full of weird contraptions and bottles of strange juice. I tried a couple, but they didn't taste very good. Wait, stop. You drank random bottles down here? Why, yes, of course, I was thirsty. Trixie, half the bottles down here are full of poison and other dangerous chemicals. Well, then it's a good thing that magicians are immune to poison damage. Twilight groaned. Throughout all of this process of realizing her feelings, she had hypothesized that it was Trixie's ego paired with her dazzling appearance that she found attractive. Unfortunately, it seemed that it was also mixed in with how much of a dumbass she was. She felt frustrated about finding her arrogance hot, as she viewed that as a negative emotion. But just saying the dumbest stuff imaginable, it was an endearing trait that she admired. She found herself smiling slightly, before quickly shutting that down before it could become a true grin. Trixie, you are the most frustrating pony I know. Please do not drink anything else from any of the bottles, she said calmly. I'm glad to hear it. Anyway, I had just seen what I thought was a bag of oats, so I tried to pull it down. Turns out, it was mud. I don't know what you have a bag of mud in your basement for. Gardening. Anyway, I knocked over a whole load of stuff. I hid, you appeared, then you paralyzed us both. And now we're here. That is what the great and powerful Trixie was doing in your basement. Your grand plan for forgiveness was to make me oatmeal? Yes! Would it have worked? No. I think it might have. No, I only eat oats on the weekend. Well, technically, it is the weekend now. My plan was to have it ready for breakfast. If you had just waited a few moments before blasting off that spell, I would have been able to explain. Then why did you run? Trixie's eyes twitched a little. Twilight took this as a small victory. She was getting to her. Good. Well, if you were discovered in your arch-nemesis' basement, I think you'd try to make a break for it too, wouldn't you? Twilight gave a small sigh and glanced away from her. She did have a point. If she was in Trixie's basement, she certainly wouldn't stick around to find out her reaction. Did she just admit to herself that they were arch-nemesis? I guess I would. She didn't know how much of Trixie's speech was the truth, and how much was embellishment. But she did see that this mess was more than partially her fault. Look, Trixie, she said, looking back into her eyes. She shivered. There was something about her expectant gaze that threw her off. I am sorry that we are trapped in this situation. I shouldn't have cast that spell. Ah, thank you. See, was that so? But you're also to blame for us being stuck in this basement. Can we agree on that? Trixie did a big melodramatic sigh. I suppose if I must. Trixie shall concede to that. Ah, compromise. How wonderful. Good. Now, I'm going to try and somehow sleep. I suggest you do the same, alright? I just want this hell to be over with, she replied wearily. If you insist, she said, smiling at her. Trixie will be here if you need me. I don't. You've caused me enough trouble, and caused enough damage to this town for a lifetime, she said with finality, her eyes shutting once more. There were a few moments of silence. No remark from Trixie. Huh? She opened her eyes again to see an expression she didn't expect to see. Hurt. It was just for a split second, as Trixie quickly put on her usual bimbo face. If you say so. But just for a moment, her mask had been off. Twilight had hurt her feelings. A pang of guilt entered her. No, she had nothing to feel guilty about. This fraud had no business being here. She decided she would just try and sleep this one through. Another few moments passed, and Trixie spoke up. Instead of her usual bombastic and boastful tone, she was a lot quieter. I am sorry, Twilight. Truly. For everything. Twilight kept her eyes shut, but hearing Trixie talk without her arrogant mask for once made her shudder, her heartbeat quickening. The only time she had sounded like that before was when she had admitted she was a second-rate magician in the incident with Ursa Minor. Was she using that tone to apologize? It was probably some manipulation tactic. Time until the spell wears off. 2 hours and 12 minutes. Trixie was whimpering. Twilight opened her eyes. She had been stuck in that phase between sleep and consciousness, letting her mind wander. She had managed to successfully distract herself by making a minute-by-minute plan for the next week. Trixie's face was scrunched up, her closed eyes twitching and darting. She was dreaming, and it didn't seem like a pleasant one. Trixie? She called out, trying to wake her. But she seemed to be too deep in her nightmare to wake up. For the love of Luna, she mumbled to herself. Why must the Night Princess curse them with such inconvenient dreams? Trixie! She shouted. But this still didn't wake her. She sighed and closed her eyes again. There really wasn't any way to wake her. There was nothing she could do. She would just try to ignore it. Twilight, don't... What? I'm sorry. What? Please don't go. She was dreaming about Twilight. Should she try again? Did Twilight really want to learn what this dream was? Was this just going to make things 100 times worse. Her heart was beating a mile a minute. "Stop," the blue horse mumbled. Okay, she had to wake her, no matter how complicated it made things. "Trixie, wake up!" Twilight shouted, as loudly as her lungs could manage. Trixie finally woke up with a jolt. Well, as much a start as you can wake up with when you can't move. She was hyperventilating as she awoke, tears now streaming from her eyes, and she was avoiding eye contact with Twilight. Trixie, are you... What happened? Are you... "None of your business, Twilight," she shouted back at her, and shut her eyes tight. "I just want to leave this fucking basement and get back to my sad and miserable life." Twilight was rendered completely speechless by the outburst, and tried to think of a way to comfort her, but her brain couldn't connect the wiring properly to create a coherent sentence. Trixie was very upset, and it seemed to be stemming from a dream she had about Twilight. Trixie had a bad dream about Twilight. "Trixie," was all she was able to get out, but Trixie opened her eyes and glared at her. It wasn't like anything she had seen from her before, not even when she was empowered by that amulet. It was real anger, real hatred, and it shot through Twilight like an arrow, lodging itself directly into her heart, causing pain to surge through her stomach with each beat. "I'm sorry that I have... Leave it." "Okay," whispered Twilight in a tiny voice. Trixie remained still, her ears twitching a few times as her breathing skewed back to a usual place. She was blinking a lot, as it was hard to wipe away tears with no limbs. She was staring anywhere that wasn't at the pony opposite her. Twilight decided not to say anything else for a while, at least until she had calmed down. A budding thought started to germinate within Twilight. What if the dream had been of a similar subject to hers, however tonally different? What if Trixie was... She did her best to suppress that thought. She didn't need that possibility. That would add a wild variable into her detailed plan to navigating this mess. Time until the spell wears off. 1 hour and 20 minutes. Trixie's breathing had slowly ebbed back to a normal state, and she seemed to be back in some sort of sleep. Twilight had been watching her for the last little while, trying to wrap her head around what had happened. At any sign of any more bad dreams, she would try and wake her again, but the previous outburst was still gnawing at her. Twilight was doing something bad to her. Well, dream Twilight anyway. Did she have to know? Twilight would rather burn down her library than tell Trixie about her dream. She shut her eyes again, expecting the image of the kiss to appear, but instead all she saw was the furious Trixie glaring at her. She didn't want that. She wanted the other one. This was worse. A lot worse. She had to know. Trixie? Are you awake?" Trixie waited a few moments, but she did eventually look at Twilight. "Yes, I am," she said, sniffling a little. "Are you all right?" "The great and powerful Trixie," she started, before sighing, "has been better. Are you able to tell me what the dream was about?" "Why, yes, I am able." "Okay." Twilight waited expectantly. Then she realized. "I'm guessing you're able, but you won't." "Correctamundo, mon capitan," she said, the usual smirk. Since when did Trixie know how to speak fancy? And why did Twilight like it when it was directed towards her? "I just want to know if there's anything I could do to make you feel, better," she said. She knew ways Trixie could make her feel better. Trixie gave out a big sigh. "Twilight, there's nothing in the world that you can do to fix this," she started, which visibly made Twilight's anxious heart rate rise. "What do you mean that I can't do to fix this?" Trixie gave out a little laugh as she smiled, still avoiding eye contact with Twilight. Twilight was staring right at her. What was she thinking? What she would give to get inside that brain of hers? Was she about to confess to something? Twilight wasn't able to suppress hope. "Do you really want to know why I'm here?" Trixie said, still avoiding eye contact by looking at the floor next to her muzzle. Yes. Twilight far too quickly for her liking. "I was here for the amulet." The barbed arrow that Trixie had shot into her heart with her outburst was suddenly yanked out, leaving her to bleed. Twilight felt like she was about to throw up. You were here to, she said slowly, anger starting to form. The thought had already crossed her mind, but the timing with the dream had convinced her that it had to be something more meaningful than that. And my dream? My dream was about how you would react. And my dream? My dream was about how you would react, she said, tears welling up again, her voice getting higher by the moment. How you'd react when you found out. Trixie, Twilight needed to say words, and say them fast. Otherwise, she'd overthink it. Why do you care about my opinion so much? I'm just another pony. Trixie smiled again, but in a more knowing way. Do you know why I came to Ponyville in the first place? To show off your subpar magic tricks? Do you remember who was sitting 2 rows behind you back at Spellementary School? Uh-huh. Twilight sent her memory back to her magical education. She was in the classroom. Moondancer was next to her, of course. The teacher was explaining things on the blackboard. Every now and again, she would hear little sparks and bursts of explosions. She turned around to glare at the pony behind her. A blue pony, with twin ponytails and a straight fringe, creating noises and scenes to try and impress the ponies around her. Nobody seemed to care, and she looked dejected. She looked up at Twilight hopefully, but she just shook her head in disgust and turned around. Those eyes. She knew those eyes. That was you? Twilight explained, returning to the present. Guilty as charged, Sparks. A nickname? Oh, hoofness. You... Trixie rolled her eyes. I just wanted you to notice me, and you never did. You were too busy with your reading. You never watched my tricks. I had mastered my craft. When I found out the Celestia had sent you off to study, I knew my first destination. I would show to the world that I was worth it, to prove to everyone that I was worth being friends with. But all you did was show everyone how pathetic I truly was. That I was a fraud with no real ability. So I came back with the amulet to force them to adore me, and I was too stupid then to even take over a village properly. Then, even after that, you still forgave me. You assured me that I could change. And that's why I came here tonight. To prove everyone wrong. That I could use the amulet for good. She took a deep inhale. To prove that everyone was wrong to ignore me. To show that you were wrong to ignore me. She said, the tears now flowing from her eyes. Because you were the only one who had faith I could change. You... did it to try and impress me? Yes. Twilight's vision began to haze over. Trixie had done everything to impress her. Everything she had done. The fraudulent magic tricks, the alicorn amulet, the break-in, all to try and make Twilight notice the great and powerful Trixie. And it worked. She was noticing her too hard right now. She could feel the blood rushing to her head. Her face bright red, she managed to get out a feeble "Trix" before she passed out, where she lay. Time until the spell wears off. Indeterminate. Why is my ear wet? It was the first thought that entered her mind as she regained consciousness. She wasn't sure how long it had been. She opened her eyes to see Trixie looking at her with surprise. She seemed to suddenly swallow. To Twilight, you're okay. I thought you might have died or something, she said, smirking in her usual way. Twilight put 2 and 2 together. Did you try to spit on me to wake me up? She said quietly, still regaining her bearings. Well, as much as you could, paralyzed on the floor. No. Why's my ear wet? Condensation. That's not how, Twilight said, before wincing at the pain that pulsed through her brain. Why had she even... Oh yeah, that's why she passed out. She sighed and looked deep into her eyes. Trixie looked back, sheepishly. I suppose that was a rather big, emotional load to endure, she said, laughing nervously. How long was I out? Oh, not long. With Trixie's timekeeping, that could mean it could be anywhere between 20 seconds and 4 hours. Anyway, Trixie seemed to hastily move on from her emotional vent. How about we play a game? It will pass the time. No, Trixie. I can't just let you do that to me, said Twilight. It was time. Trixie had shared it all with Twilight. Now it was only fair that Twilight shared it all back. Your plan worked. I've been thinking about you, she gulped. And tonight even dreaming about you, she said. Trixie raised an eyebrow before her eyes widened. Her cheeks flushed crimson. You dreamt of me too? Yes, you are so frustrating and cause so many problems. Every time I think about you, I get angry, like I want to smash windows and burn trees. But there's something else burning. A fire that I don't know how to control, Twilight said slowly. Her heart was going faster than she ever remembered it going. What kind of fire? Trixie asked, her eyes wide, and staring right into Twilight's soul. Twilight stared back, her eyes glancing down at Trixie's mouth. She could only think of one thing now, and it was so close to her, so intimate, so reachable. A fire of clunk. Twilight felt her rigid hooves loosen and flop onto the floor. The same happened with Trixie. The spell had worn off. Twilight scrambled to her hooves, her bones aching, and her brain in a scrambled, flustered mess. Trixie got up in a similar way, staggering to the side, leaning against one of the shelves. The ponies stared at each other for a couple of moments. Twilight wanted to jump for joy, leap around at their freedom, but it had come at the most inconvenient time. Both of their cheeks were flushed red. Twilight was the first to speak. She needed to get out of this situation. That was far too close of a call, and she needed to regain control of herself. This was bad. This was very bad. She couldn't know. Even though that cat was very much out of the bag, she could not openly say it to Trixie. I'll show you the door. Trixie just nodded, and the two silently moved up the stairs. Dawn was slowly rising over the horizon as they reached the door. Trixie looked out the door, and back at her. She was at a complete loss of what to do. Thanks for... she started, but didn't seem to know how to finish. Just go, said Twilight quickly, before I do something I will regret. Trixie blinked. Something you would regret? Like what? Twilight stared, and before she could even process what she was doing, she spoke. Something like this. She moved forward and kissed her. Trixie's eyes were initially wide with shock, and it looked like she was about to move away. But they eventually fluttered shut, and she kissed back. All of the built-up tension and pressure burst out of Twilight. Her horn shone, and little sparks started flying on the end. Trixie's did the same, and together their manes started to gently float upwards. Everything in Twilight's brain was screaming at her to stop, but her entire body was telling her to go on. After a few moments, she felt herself stepping backwards, releasing from the kiss. Trixie did the same, and the pair were left staring at each other. Almost immediately, regret flooded through Twilight's body. What had she just done? She had given into an urge, and now everything was worse. The cat was so far out of the bag and the cat weren't even on the same continent anymore. Twilight's eye twitched. Trixie was beautiful. The sunrise behind her was gently lighting up her mane, blowing it in the morning breeze. Her face slowly morphed into a smile. The dream she had wasn't a dream anymore. It was reality. And that was the problem with reality. Dreams are just dreams. What happens when they come true? Consequences. Now she was going to tell all of her friends that she just made out with the great and powerful Trixie. This was too much. Trixie, please leave. Trixie's face dropped. What? Just go. I need to work this out. What is there to work out? She said, getting closer again, but Twilight stepped away. Please, just not now. Trixie looked crestfallen, and gently moved away towards the door. She did a big stretch, much like a dog, before moving outwards. Just before she was gone completely, she turned around, with a soft smirk remaining on her face. I hope that you know, the great and powerful Trixie will never let you live this down, Sparks. I am well aware, she said emotionlessly, her legs wobbling slightly. Trixie looked down at them, and let out a little laugh. She was enjoying this. But behind the arrogant smugness, Twilight could sense real joy and excitement behind her movements. She turned and trotted away, limping slightly at the stiffness of her joints. Twilight slammed the door shut and slid down into a lying position as she started to cry. The most emotionally charged night of Twilight's life was over, with fireworks for a conclusion. But the most chaotic week of her life was only just beginning. Hello, it's me, Bunny. Again, I'm plugging Cinna, aka Red Hoodie 21's GoFundMe. He's raising money to get him and his cat Oscar out of an abusive home. More info can be found in the GoFundMe linked below. If you do donate, you can take a screenshot of the donation receipt and email it to me at bunnyblastYGO@gmail.com. Then I'll send you the current fics I am narrating up to 4 weeks in advance, as soon as I finish them. Beyond that, this Friday, we will start on Making Up for Lost Time, Part 1 of 2, by Dapper Little Arts. And next Tuesday, Twilight's New Moon, Chapter 3, Electrifying. Bye!